it's making notes, and you remember we talked about whatever isn't used early in life kind of gets trimmed away, so they lose the potential to what? Pruning. Yeah, it's like if you didn't have it early on in life, it's kind of gone. Like we talked about the child who didn't have language early on in life, and he was a feral child, and then they worked with him a lot, and he could never learn that again because it wasn't important early on in life. Although he could hear like a nut dropping on leaves, because that was important for his survival. So we want the children to have all these experiences early on, so that they'll have just lots of potential for learning things later. And as Christy said, you know, the things that you learn early on in life, if you ask people what they were scared, what they're still scared of. And when I've asked people this question, it's usually something that they were exposed to early in life. So I have an irrational fear of Bigfoot because I watched that when I was 5 years old. And to this day, I still worry about it. You know what I mean? Had I seen that when I was 10, would I have the same fear? I don't know. But it's really stuck with me because it was in that phase when we were so impressionable. And the opposite, positive things will really stick with them, and as they take it later and they take it into the rest of their life, it's going to become like an old friend to them. And we're going to demonstrate some of these because all of these not only are appropriate for this child 0 to 6 years old, but they are also foundations for things.
And we say that the sensorial materials are keys to life, and so they come to us, it's kind of this cycle, they come to us with all these experiences of the world in which they live in, and they get to experience these sensorial materials that help refine, help order their life, and they're not substitutes for the things in life, but they're keys. They help the child to take this information and apply it to once they go back into the world.
You were going to show a little bit of how the sensorial work prepares the child for language.
Mm-hmm. So when we think of language, we think of written language and spoken language. When we start out with the cylinder blocks, they have knob cylinders. And this is preparing the child for the pincer grasp to be able to hold their pencil. And so when we really accentuate the hand movements, so when they pick up the cylinder, they are using and strengthening their finger muscles. We also have a geometric cabinet over here. Again, you'll notice that they have a knob, and so they're using their pincer grasp, which helps them with the pencil grip. And then we also show them to trace the contours of the shape, and we go over this several times. And it helps them to strengthen and coordinate their wrist movements and also their fingers. We also go around the frame of the inset. And so whenever we give a lesson on these, we really want to highlight and accentuate those movements so that they can be prepared when when they begin writing.
Yeah, it's that same motion that you would use as you make the letters.
Over here we have what we call the touch boards and the touch tablets, and they introduce the child to rough and smooth. That's another quality that they're introduced to, but it also prepares them for writing. When they're using the pencil, it helps them with their lightness of touch, so they're not taking the pencil, really move it hard on the paper, and then it breaks the tip of the pencil or whatever they're using, or it tears the paper. And so this is helping them gain that refinement of their movements, the lightness of touch. And it also prepares for sandpaper letters that Angie has here.
So I think I've talked to all of you about how we present the letters, so we would present this to a child and say, this is so they're getting this impression, but during one of my student teaching sessions, I realized how important those touch boards were, because I sat down with a child who seemed very intelligent, and I tried to do a couple of these with him, and he wasn't repeating the sounds, he wasn't tracing the letters, he was just kind of like this all the time. Since he was not able to absorb, I went back and did those with him, and then a few days later came back and did this, and he was able to then focus on it. But it was kind of like, if you think of somebody who's never seen technology before, and suddenly they're introduced to technology, it's like they're not going to be able to sit down and immediately use it effectively, because they're just so like, whoa, there's something moving there, and then, does that make sense what I'm saying? So it's like they need these first impressions, otherwise when we present these things to them later, they're going to be so overwhelmed that they won't even be able to take it in. So that's why we want them to have time with all these things. As simple as it seems, you know, putting things in order, touching some boards, like they're all significant. And that's what I love about Montessori is even though it doesn't make sense to us, we've talked before about that invisible need for the child's development. It is meeting a need for them, and it is all purposeful. Like this little activity that helps them concentrate and sort and see little differences inside, it also is preparing your hand for writing. How cool is that? Like just as a side effect, an indirect preparation is what we call it. But wait, there's more. It also prepares for geometry.
So we have a series of lessons called the constructive triangles. This is one of our first constructive triangle lessons. And we highlight where these black lines are. And then we'd slowly move them together. Like it's a magnet, as Angie would say. And we push them together. And what do we get out of these two right angle isosceles triangles?
Square.
Is a square. So the child can see that these two kinds of triangles form a square. And then let's see what else we can do here. We get a parallelogram. And so the child is able to experiment with these triangles, and they can see that that also makes a parallelogram. But if we put it here, it makes another square. And we continue to work with the other triangles, showing that they make all kinds of different shapes.
Yeah, there are some that make, I think it's like a 12-sided shape when we put it together a certain way. So they're just having all these geometric experiences, and obviously it's important for building. And later, a later work with these is she would come back and she would say to the child, you know, this is the angle, and this is the vertex, this is the base, this is the height, which obviously then play into calculating area of a shape and things like that. Then in the elementary, some of these materials come back, so they've had this experience, and there's so many things that this leads up to. In the elementary, we use the exact same boxes, and we talk about like Pythagoras theorem, and the one that I'm going to show you tonight, though, is talking about measuring the circumference of a circle. This is something we have from our fraction circles. These are all materials that we use in the primary classroom, this one right here, that come back in the elementary class. And again, it's like an old friend. So I might sit down with the child and say, Christine, let's see here. We've got our pentagon. We'll put that, oh, it's just right, doesn't it? Now, there's a little bit of white space there around the edges. Let's see, let's try our hexagon here. White space is a little bit smaller. Let's see, why don't you try another one? Now, what are you seeing about that white space?
There's not much left.
Hardly any, yeah. The white space gets smaller and smaller the more sides we have. What do you think if we had a shape that had 20 sides? What if it had 50 or 100 or 1,000?
You know, if you could see this.
Yeah, you know, what about infinity? If we could have a shape like that, we would call that a circle. That's what a circle is. It has an infinite number of sides. You know, when we've done in the past, when we've figured out the perimeter of a shape, you know, if it's a regular shape where all the sides are the same size, then how do you find the length of the perimeter? Just measure one side and multiply it. Yeah, so we've done that already. But that's kind of hard with our circle. It's hard to know how large the outside of it is, that circumference, because it just has an infinite number of sides. So I'm going to show you today what we can do, how we can measure that. So I've got some chalk here. Let's make a little line on our circle. There we go. That way we know that that's our starting point. We'll set this circle right on the line and it'll face us so that we can see what's going on here. And we're going to put that line right at the starting point. And I'm going to roll it. And when it stops, we'll mark it. Okay, so that's how long our circumference is, the length of this portion of line here. I want to look at something else here. I'm going to line up our circle on this line so that The edge is at the beginning and the center is directly on top of our line. Let's mark that edge there.